A traumatized young man and skilled warrior gradually transforms from being primarily powered by rage and having a one-dimensional perspective on the world to being wiser and more mature. His actions at the beginning of his character arc are wrong, but it is hard not to sympathize with him nonetheless, as those actions come from a real place of vulnerability and desperation. It's hard not to root for him to become a better person, and when he takes steps in that direction, it is so very satisfying. Yeah, there are two characters to whom that description applies. But while Zuko completes a scintillating redemption arc, culminating in him turning against his father and joining the Avatar, Jet's story is more complicated, and it ends in tragedy. Constantly, he battles between his extremist tendencies and his desire for a new life. Eventually, the choice is taken out of his hands, and he's drawn into a grandiose conspiracy far more intricate than the simplistic good Earth Kingdom versus bad Fire Nation dynamic that forms the foundation of his worldview. This is Avatar Explained, Jet Edition. We're introduced to Jet in the episode of the same name. In that episode, he is a very straightforward character. The Fire Nation killed his parents and left him without a home, so he wants to take revenge on the Fire Nation. He's interesting, but not because of who he is. No, he's interesting here because of the effect he has on other characters. For Katara, he's her first real love interest. She falls for him completely and without thinking. She sees this handsome boy talking eloquently about freeing the world from the Fire Nation, and she immediately falls in love.
And then he betrays her. She believed he was working for the good of those who were made to suffer by the Fire Nation. But really, he just wanted to strike a blow against the Fire Nation no matter the cost. He doesn't care who gets hurt. Katara takes this betrayal very personally. In episode 316, when Aang says that she is like Jet for wanting revenge on the man who killed her mother, she responds that Jet hurt innocent people, while her mother's killer is anything but innocent. However, how Sokka reacts to Jet is as interesting. At first glance, they don't appear to be that different. They are both young warriors who despise the Fire Nation. One would expect them to become friends, but despite Jet's best efforts, they don't. Katara believes this is because Sokka is jealous of Jet, and this is not an unreasonable assumption. Jet is older, stronger, and a much better fighter. Sokka wants to be seen as the leader of Team Avatar. He says as much early in the episode. However, his skills as a leader are much less developed than Jet's. Even if Jet didn't call himself the leader of his group, everyone else would. He is charismatic and smooth. There is no question that he believes everything he says. He is clever and committed. Unlike Sokka, who tried and tried in the early episodes of Avatar to force Aang to leave, Jet brought his band of freedom fighters together. Even when they disagree with the specific actions he is taking, they stick with him because he gave them a home, and it is hard to blame them for that. Part of Sokka's disdain for Jet is caused by jealousy. It is hard to deny that. But Sokka has good reason to be distrustful of him. There is something a little too slick about him. Sokka sees proof of Jet's dark side when Jet attacks a harmless old man just because this old man is a Fire Nation citizen. When Sokka confronts him about this, Jet thanks Sokka for saving his life. This confuses Sokka, so Jet claims that the old man was an assassin sent to kill him, and that this assassin had a knife with a vial of poison. It would have been easy for Sokka to say nothing or accept this story, especially since it depicts Sokka in a heroic light. This makes it interesting that Sokka contradicts Jet. Episode 110 is a crucial episode for Sokka because it makes clear how different he is from Jet. It draws a clear line between the two. Sokka's most defining characteristics throughout the episodes before this have been his passionate hatred for the Fire Nation and his assertion that he is a great warrior. So it is interesting that he succeeds in this episode by stopping Jet's plans to defeat the Fire Nation, and by relying not on physical strength, but on creativity and instinct. Sokka may not be as good at hand-to-hand combat as Jet, but his strategic sense and unconventional way of looking at the world give him an advantage. As the episode argues, his instincts may be wrong some of the time, but when they are right, they can be a major help. If this was all we saw of Jet in Avatar: The Last Airbender, he would be an interesting character of the day, but nothing more. Thankfully, we get to see more of him, and he is more interesting than he is in episode 110. He reappears in season 2, as he and his freedom fighters are going to Ba Sing Se. The idea is to start over, as the personal trauma Jet has suffered makes him more than the typical well-intentioned extremist you see in a lot of shows. I am glad we get to see more shades of him. It's appropriate that he happens upon Zuko, not just because the two characters are quite similar, but because they are in the same stage of their lives. They are going through a time of great change, and trying to balance their best impulses against their darker sides.
Zuko has an easier time of this than Jet, though this is partially because Zuko has Uncle Iroh to check his worst impulses. Jet has no one like that. Though Zuko and Jet collaborate to take food from the captain, who's been living like a king while the refugees starve, they're torn apart first when Zuko refuses to join Jet, then when Jet sees Iroh with hot tea. Because the tea was cold before, Jet believes that Iroh and Zuko are secretly firebenders. What's important to remember is that though Jet is right, the process by which he arrives at this conclusion is completely contrived and arbitrary, and everyone thinks he is crazy, including his fellow freedom fighters. These fellow freedom fighters were excited to make a fresh start, and they are disappointed to see Zuko sinking back into his old tendencies. Jet, wanting to gather more evidence before he accuses Zuko and Iroh of being firebenders, steals their spark rocks. He thinks that this will result in them using firebending to start a fire, but instead Iroh borrows spark rocks from his neighbor. This infuriates Jet, and he abandons his plan to gather evidence. Instead, he storms into the tea shop where Iroh and Zuko are working and accuses them of being firebenders. No one believes him, so he pulls out his weapons. Zuko, sick and tired of his schemes, decides to fight him. Jet taunts him by saying Zuko could fight better if only he uses firebending, but Zuko does not fall for the bait, and gradually he gains the upper hand on Jet in the sword fight.
When the Dai Li arrive, they order the fighting to stop. Zuko happily complies. Jet does not. He is too overwhelmed by his anti-Fire Nation mania. It is a flaw he cannot overcome. He tries to fight the Dai Li while shouting that Zuko and Iroh are from the Fire Nation. Because of this, the Dai Li brainwash him. This is one of the most eerie sequences in the entire show, and it being intercut with Long Fang informing Team Avatar of what he does and how he does it is an inspired structural choice. Jet, whatever his faults, does not deserve this. True, it would not have happened if he had not given in to his worst impulses, but his failure to become the best version of himself does not mean the very things that make him who he is should be taken away from him. However, from a narrative standpoint, it is fitting that this happens to Jet of all characters. For one, he is a major enough character that the audience cares about what happens to him, but he is not so major that the very structure of the narrative is thrown off by the Dai Li mind controlling him. More importantly, this works extremely well from a thematic standpoint. If Jet's downfall had been caused by a firebender, this would have validated his ideology to an extent. But it's not. It's caused by an earthbender. Jet is so concerned with the threat posed by firebenders, who ultimately wish him no harm, that he does not see the Earthbenders who do wish him harm. It's unfortunate, though it is not quite Jet's end. If it was, it would have been a tragic conclusion to his character. It would have been a case of him failing to rise above his flaws. He would have been a sort of anti-Zuko. Instead, he comes back in episode 217, Lake Laogai. Jet says he wants to help. Katara blushes, but she is furious. There is no one more tender and caring than Katara. There is no one more willing to give a person a chance. But if that person turns against her, there is no one more willing to bear down on them with vicious intensity. When Sokka tells her that they don't even know why he is there, she says it doesn't matter. She says they should not listen to what he has to say. She says they can't trust him. Toph, amused at her extreme reaction to him, asks if Jet used to be her boyfriend. When she says no, Toph responds in a playful, sing-song voice that she can tell Katara is lying. Eventually, they decide to accept Jet's help. They don't know if they can trust him, but they don't have any other leads. When his fellow freedom fighters run into him, they talk about how he was thrown in prison by the Dai Li, an event Jet says never happened. Toph, confused, says that according to her lie detector senses, both of them are telling the truth. Team Avatar eventually figures out this is because Jet believes a version of events that is not the same as reality. He was sent to mislead them, his memories altered. However, this plan backfires on Long Fang and the Dai Li, because once Jet realizes what happened to him, he starts actually helping Team Avatar. He informs them about Lake Laogai, and they go there, discovering the Dai Li's massive brainwashing scheme. They are there to rescue Appa, but that is not necessary. Zuko goes to Lake Laogai to capture Appa, but after being persuaded by his uncle to abandon his quest for vengeance and make his own destiny, Zuko sets him free. This is a vital moment for Zuko's character, as it proves that he is capable of changing for the better, but it does mean that Team Avatar's quest is mostly pointless. This is a trick the show pulls twice. Think about how it portrays the Day of Black Sun invasion. This is supposed to be the moment when Team Avatar defeats the Fire Lord and restores balance to the world. They are not naive to think they are going to win. Their plan is excellent, but they lose because Azula knows their plan. Instead, it is Zuko who confronts Ozai. The purpose of the Day of Black Sun episodes 310 and 311 is revealed to not have been to have Aang triumph over his arch-nemesis, but instead to have Zuko turn against his father and join the Avatar. Narratively speaking, this is very effective, and the show would become excruciatingly boring if Team Avatar always won. But it does mean that Jet's death at the hands of the Dai Li at the end of episode 217 does not need to happen. If Team Avatar had stayed in their house in the upper ring of Ba Sing Se, invited Jet in for tea when he came by, and waited for Appa to come back before they stormed the Earth King's palace, everything would have unfolded in exactly the same way, except that Jet would still be alive. They still would have been able to convince the Earth King about the war, as though they try at first to show him the mind control prison. It has already been covered up by Long Fang. Therefore, the Earth King does not believe them until Team Avatar reveals to him the Fire Nation drill that has been piercing through Ba Sing Se's outermost wall since episode 213, the drill, before Team Avatar even entered the city. Maybe if Jet had been given more time, he could have overcome his flaws. If Zuko had somehow died in the first half of Season 3, he would have died a failure too. We don't get to choose how we die. Not really. Some say that Jet achieves redemption by the end of his arc because he fights with Aang against Long Fang, but I don't completely agree. Certainly, he dies doing good. He has become a better person than the single-minded extremist he is at the beginning of the show, but he is still conflicted. He is not won out over his worst impulses. The major conflict at the heart of his character is the same conflict at the heart of Zuko's character and Katara's character. It's about whether he can fight through the darkness within himself. and in the end, he doesn't have the chance. He has not decisively lost the battle for his soul, but the last thing he did before he got brainwashed, leading to the string of events that got him killed, was turn against his character growth and give in to his old vices. This is why Jet's death affects me as much as it does. It is not because it is a brutal death, or because he shows he cannot change, or because the entire season had been leading up to his death. None of those things are true. What is true is that he is one of the few characters in Avatar: The Last Airbender who dies in the show's narrative. The specter of death hangs over many characters, from Iroh's mourning of his son, to Katara being shaped by her mother's death, to Aang learning to handle the loss of his entire culture. But those deaths are in the past. Jet's is in the present. But no, that is not why it affects me either.
It affects me because we never really got the chance to see if Jet could become a better person. He should have gotten that opportunity. He deserved that opportunity. I feel about Jet's death the same way I feel about the death of a child, and really, Jet isn't much more than a child himself. At 18, he's older than most of the main characters in Avatar: The Last Airbender, and he's older than I was when I first watched the show, but he's younger than I am now. It's a tragedy not just because he died young, but because he died without getting the chance to fully define his life. He died in a period of his life in which his values were changing. Sadly, that change was never completed. In fact, Jet's death is a very specific kind of tragedy. It's a Shakespearean tragedy. There's a 5-act structure to a Shakespearean tragedy, with the climax being in the 3rd act. Everything else proceeds from that point. Think about Romeo and Juliet. As you might remember from your 9th grade English class, the 3rd act of that play ends with Romeo being exiled after having killed Tybalt. The climax isn't right next to the end, as it is in traditional 3-act storytelling, but rather close to the middle. From the climax, everything proceeds with a profound sense of inevitability. Jet is doomed the moment he decides to pick a fight with Zuko. That's his Act 3. From that point forward, everything that happens to him isn't really about him. It's about the circumstances surrounding him. He is literally just a puppet. This is a person who calls his friends freedom fighters. He always talks about freedom, but in the end, he has none. So thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like and comment and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can. And if you want to see more videos like this, keep watching Avatar. It's a fantastic show. And tune in soon for the next Avatar Explained video. It will be coming very soon. You won't have to wait long. Thanks again. Adios, comrades.